Back in 2005, Motley Crue were out on tour to promote their anthology album Red, White, and Crue. The promotion cycle for the record saw the group get banned from late night TV, and I'm going to be covering that in a separate video down the road. But today I want to talk about one specific concert the band played where they received some pretty devastating news. A female fan on her way to one of the band's concerts mysteriously vanished. Motley Crue would team up with America's Most Wanted to find out what happened, and today we're going to explore that story. On March 7, 2005, Motley Crue were set to play a show in Washington, D.C. at the MCI Center. A female fan, a 32-year-old named Tracy Gardner, who lived in Baltimore, was planning on driving to the nation's capital one day prior to meet a friend of hers, a man named Christian, who she was going to attend the show with. Christian had bought Tracy tickets to the Motley Crue show as a birthday present. But sadly, she never made it to the show or to Washington, D.C. On the morning of the concert, Christian phoned Tracy's place of work, a construction materials supplier, to see if she was there, but her supervisor said she wasn't. Her supervisor and friend Monica was quoted as telling America's Most Wanted, "Tracy is a fun-loving person. She loved rock and roll and Motley Crue was her favorite." And fearing for her friend's safety, Monica called the police. The authorities soon started questioning Tracy's husband, her friends, and family, and nobody had heard from her since 3:05 p.m. on March 6th, the day of her disappearance. An outgoing call from her cell phone was made to her friend Christian, but he wasn't able to answer. He would call her back almost 16 minutes later, but it went straight to voicemail. The police were able to determine that Tracy's car was seen in the Baltimore Harbor Tunnel at 7:48 p.m. on March 6th going in the southbound direction. When her friends attempted to call her cell phone, it appeared to be turned off. The police would end up locating her car in the Baltimore suburb of Glen Burnie at a Days Inn motel 10 days after her disappearance. But there was no sign of a struggle, no forensic evidence, or even a body. At the time, the police had no leads, but they initially put up a $10,000 reward for any information that could help solve the case of her disappearance. Almost 6 weeks after going missing, the news reached the members of Motley Crue who were out on tour. The band was about to take the stage in Portland, Maine, when bassist Nikki Sixx received an email about the missing fan. He would tell the Baltimore Sun, "I showed it to the band and we were like, we gotta do something. We knew a $10,000 reward had been put up, and we decided to match that. But what we could really do was get it national exposure." And that's exactly what happened. The band's involvement helped get the word out and the case got national attention. The band even paid to have Tracy's photo distributed through media outlets and teamed up with the TV show America's Most Wanted. Since her disappearance, Tracy's coworkers would spend their weekends looking for her, and her supervisor would tell the Sun, "When she didn't come to work that Monday morning, I knew right away. Tracy loves rock and roll and Motley Crue. She would not have missed it for the world." Tracy's family would receive an outpouring of support from friends and strangers, and Motley Crue at the time were planning on playing another show in the Washington area in August of 2005, with Sixx telling the Sun, "We'll save 2 tickets for her in the front row. They're in her name and we'll call. We hope she picks them up." When the band's August show arrived, those tickets went unclaimed, but Tracy's parents attended the show and personally thanked the band for their help, as you can see here.
Motley Crue with the band to personally thank them for their generous donation and what they've done for us in helping with the search of our daughter. How you doing?
I'm Nikki.
Nikki?
That's
Nikki?
Tommy.
This is Tommy.
Hello,
how you doing? How you doing?
Backstage, Tracy's parents had the chance to personally thank Tommy Lee and Nikki Sixx for their help, their support, and their caring.
Well, hopefully it's helped a little bit, you know.
It's helped tremendous. You can imagine. We want to personally thank you for all your help that you've given. I mean, I'm telling you, you just don't understand what it's been. It's been great. Thank you.
That's so sweet.
A lot of people thought that she had been found because there's been nothing on TV.
It disappeared, right?
Because it disappeared. You wouldn't believe how many of your fans have stepped up and donated to the
They're
reward
awesome,
fund.
aren't they?
They are.
Yeah.
They are. They come up, and you know, and they email me all the time. We stay in touch now. It's just like, you know, and it's all because of you guys. It's all because of you guys. You know, this is my first concert. What am I in store
This your
for?
first concert? Oh boy.
It's my very first.
It's fun.
Yeah, you're gonna like it. He's gonna like it. We got some stuff specifically.
That's what I understand.
Geared.
You know, we immediately said let's help with the money thing, but like when you were talking, we said, just who cares about the money? We can go out in the press and talk about it, and millions of people hear about it. So, you know, was awesome to be able to meet you guys, see you face to face.
Thank you. Thank you for taking your time. I know.
The case wouldn't be solved until years later, in 2010, when Tracy's husband would be arrested for her disappearance. No body was ever found, and it was the first murder conviction in Baltimore County history without a body. No body cases, as they're called, have become easier to investigate for the police due to technology. Investigators can look at communications, social media, financial transactions, and cell phones. In this case, cell phone records were important in the police's investigation, as her husband tapped Tracy's home phone thinking she was having an extramarital affair, and her employer also recorded all of her calls for quality assurance purposes. Those recorded calls captured Tracy talking about her failed marriage and involved Tracy and her husband arguing with each other. But the key piece of evidence that came to light several years later after her disappearance happened when grainy surveillance camera from the Days Inn showed a mysterious figure exit the car and showing the key fob being used to activate the car's security alarm. When Tracy's husband Dennis was interviewed by the police, he gave them his key to the car thinking it was a spare. But when the police investigated further, they soon found that the car only had one set of keys. The police determined that Dennis had to have been the person driving the car that night when Tracy disappeared, and he was the grainy figure captured on the Days Inn security camera. Police had long suspected her husband, but without a smoking gun, it was difficult to press charges. Prosecutors would claim Dennis's actions constituted a crime of passion, alleging Tracy was having an affair with the man she was planning on seeing the Motley Crue concert with, and was about to divorce her husband. During her murder trial, recordings of the pair arguing were played for the jury. Without a body or any forensic evidence, first-degree murder charge would have been difficult to come by. Instead, the jury found Dennis guilty of second-degree murder, with a judge handing out a maximum sentence of 30 years, with all but 18 of them suspended. Dennis, for his part, has long claimed he had nothing to do with his wife's disappearance, and in February of 2019, he went before a parole board to secure his release, but was denied and remains in prison.
When asked by commissioners if he had anything to say about his conviction, he said, quote, "I have nothing to say. I didn't commit a crime. I have no idea where she, Tracy, is, and I will take it to my grave." In closing testimony to commissioners, Tetso choked back tears, saying, quote, "I don't belong here. I want to get back to work. Please grant me parole." Commissioners denied his request, citing his lack of remorse, overwhelming evidence in the case, and loss of appeals. Gardner's foster sister had perhaps the most emotional testimony, saying her son, who was very young at the time of the murder, says he has no memory of his aunt.
I said, "You don't remember her going to your games or your Christmas, birthdays, going over her house, going to the circus?" And he says, "No, I'm sorry."
Tetso will now have to serve the remainder of his term, and with good behavior could be out as soon as November of 2022.
And one of their fans who went missing. This event happened a year after the Motley Crue one did. It involves an Ohio State second-year med student named Brian Shaffer. March 31st, 2006 was a Friday and was the beginning of a week-long spring break for Ohio State students. Shaffer started the night by going out for dinner with his father, Randy. His father recalled to the police that his son seemed exhausted from studying for his midterm exams, frequently pulling all-nighters. Brian was planning on meeting up with a friend of his named William Clint Florence after the dinner at a bar on campus called the Ugly Tuna Saloona in Columbus. The pair would go bar hopping towards the Arena District before meeting up with a friend of Florence named Meredith Reed. She would give the pair a ride back to the Ugly Tuna Saloona, where they were planning on ending the night. The bar is located on the second level of a building and is primarily accessed through an escalator. Security cameras at the bar captured the trio around 12:30 a.m. coming up the escalator to the bar. Shaffer and Florence were spotted on camera at 1:55 a.m. chatting outside of the bar with two women before Shaffer headed back in. The woman that Shaffer was talking to gave him her number and was pretty flirtatious with him, at least according to witnesses. That would be the last time Brian was spotted on camera. The bar would close 5 minutes later at 2 a.m., and both Reed and Florence waited for Brian outside the bar, but he didn't show. They tried to contact his cell phone but were unsuccessful, and they thought maybe he had wandered home since his apartment was only several blocks away. Brian was scheduled the following Monday to fly down to Florida to vacation with his girlfriend, and when he missed his flight, that's when concern grew over his whereabouts, and he was reported missing. It should be noted that the Ugly Tuna Saloona has 3 exits, 2 of which had cameras. The rear exit didn't have a camera, but there was a lot of construction going on in the alleyway, and the tight space out back led some to believe that it was unlikely he left the bar since he was likely intoxicated. The university area where the bar is located also has a significantly high crime rate, and in reviewing the footage, the police had several theories. One of the security cameras from the bar would pan the area, so perhaps one of the cameras missed him as he was leaving. Another theory is that he simply vanished, not wanting to be found, possibly disguising himself in different clothes than he entered with. There was also several things going on in Brian's life around the time of his disappearance. One was that his mother had passed away from a rare form of cancer several weeks prior, and while his friends stated to the police that he seemed to be handling it well, it was also a devastating blow for him. Another was that he frequently told friends that his real passion was to be in a rock band, despite his decision to pursue a career in medicine. At the time of his disappearance, Brian was in a relationship with a fellow medical student named Alexis Wagner, and she would reveal that a few nights before his disappearance, Brian told her to move on and find someone else, as he was struggling with his mom's death. A couple weeks earlier, he even asked her to, and I quote, just go away with him. As I had stated earlier, Brian was planning on vacationing with his girlfriend the following Monday to Florida. In fact, the night he disappeared, he called his girlfriend to check in around 10 p.m., confirming the vacation plans and telling her he loved her. It was also reported by several sources, including friends close to him, that he was planning on proposing to his girlfriend in Florida. In similar cases where someone has disappeared or vanished, investigators claim that people often disappear as an act of desperation, not when they're about to go on vacation, which made the case very mind-boggling. Another theory is that perhaps something more sinister happened. Maybe he was murdered inside the bar and hidden somewhere. Some online sleuths believe that he may have been the victim of the smiley-face serial killer who preyed on young, drunk college men. The police investigated that theory and have since ruled it out. Several days after Brian's disappearance, a homeless person claimed to have seen him, but after the police questioned him, he didn't reveal much. There's also been some suspicion cast on his friend William Clint Florence, who he went drinking with that night, and Florence has refused to take a lie detector test. Let's talk about the Pearl Jam connection now. Brian was a member of the Pearl Jam fan club, and he had bought tickets to the band's show in Detroit on May 22, 2006. His girlfriend would end up auctioning the seats to raise money for his reward fund, and Brian's father, Randy, was taken aback by the support he received from Pearl Jam's fan club and the community. And his father would also attend a Pearl Jam show in Cincinnati in 2006, where frontman Eddie Vedder even mentioned his son, as you can see here.
A young man named Brian Shaffer kind of went missing.
4 years later in 2010, during a show in Columbus, Vedder once again mentioned Brian and dedicated the song Come Back to him. It was truly a horrible time for his father Randy, whose wife passed away a few weeks before his son disappeared, and Randy would spend the next several years chasing every lead in hopes of finding his son, until a freak accident took his life in 2008. After his death, a condolence book was posted online, and one of the signatures read, "To Dad, love Brian." The message appeared to be posted from the US Virgin Islands, giving more credence to the theory that he started a new life somewhere else, but when investigators looked into this, they determined it was a hoax. In the years that followed, there were reported sightings of Brian in Texas, Michigan, and even across the pond in Sweden, all of which were investigated but didn't shed any more light on his disappearance. In 2014, the Columbus police would reveal that their local Crime Stoppers hotline was still receiving several tips a month. In 2019, a picture of a homeless American man in Tijuana, Mexico surfaced online. Some speculated it may have been Shaffer, and it would make its way to the FBI, who used facial recognition technology and confirmed it was not him. As recently as March of this year, the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation will put out an age-enhanced photo of what they think Shaffer would look like today. Detective John Hurst, who was assigned the case, would recall to Dispatch.com in 2019 his thoughts on Brian's status, saying, "Is Brian alive? There's a possibility he is alive, but if you look at the probabilities that he isn't alive, those are just as great." Metallica was set to play a show at John Paul Jones Arena at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville in October of 2009. Going to the concert was a female sophomore student from Virginia Tech, a 20-year-old named Morgan Harrington, who drove to the show with 3 of her friends. During the opening act, Harrington told her friends that she was going to the bathroom. Her friends noticed she'd been gone for a while, and when she didn't return to her seat, they called her cell around 8:48 p.m. She would answer her phone and tell her friends that she ended up outside of the arena having a cigarette, according to CBS News. Due to the venue's no re-entry policy, she would tell her friends not to worry about her and that she would find her way home. The night of the concert, Harrington was wearing a Pantera t-shirt and a black skirt. 2 people that night reported seeing her in different parts of the parking lot outside of the venue, with the last sighting of her being at 9:30 p.m. on a nearby bridge trying to hitch a ride. In addition to that, 2 witnesses claimed to have seen her with 3 men outside of the arena. The following day, she was supposed to see her parents in the afternoon, but when she failed to show up, her parents reported her missing. The day after her disappearance, a lacrosse player would find her ID and phone with the battery removed in the parking lot of the venue. A few weeks later, her Pantera t-shirt was found a few miles away from where she was last seen, outside of an apartment building. Sadly, in January of 2010, Morgan's remains were found by a farmer in a rural area about 10 miles from her last known location. DNA samples from Harrington's body happened to match a case that happened 4 years earlier in 2005 in Fairfax City. In that case, a woman was walking home from a grocery store at night and was attacked by an unknown assailant. The assailant thankfully was scared away by a pedestrian in the area. The woman who was attacked got a good look at the suspect, and the police were able to come up with a sketch of the man. The woman would describe the man as a 6-foot-tall African-American with facial hair between the ages of 25 and 35. With a DNA match and a sketch, the police now needed the name of the suspect. Metallica frontman James Hetfield would release a public service announcement in hopes of soliciting tips from the public to help solve the Harrington case. Metallica would even offer a cash reward of $50,000 in addition to the $100,000 that Crime Stoppers was offering at the time. Here's a PSA that Hetfield cut.
Back in 2010, our band offered $50,000 to help catch the person responsible for murdering Morgan Harrington. Since that time, authorities uncovered new evidence linking her killer to a similar assault on a woman in Virginia. If you've seen the person in this sketch or have any information about this case or any others, please contact your local police or submit your information online. Remember, any information, no matter how small you might think it is, could be that crucial piece investigators need to help solve the case. Right now, there's up to $150,000 reward. If you have any information on this case, please call the number on your screen. Thank you.
Years later, there would finally be a breakthrough in the Harrington case, but it would come at the cost of another young woman's life. In September of 2014, an 18-year-old University of Virginia student named Hannah Graham went missing. Her remains wouldn't be found until several weeks later on a rural property. Through witness testimony and security camera footage, the police were able to identify a man named Jesse Matthews, who was with Graham the night she disappeared. Through forensic evidence, the police were able to determine that Matthews' DNA was a match in the 2005 attack and the disappearance of Harrington and Graham. He would end up being arrested. Matthews, for his part, was heavily built and stood 6 feet tall and used to play college football. His college years would be overshadowed by several assault accusations in 2002 and 2003. Each time the police would investigate these allegations, but he was never arrested. After each allegation, Matthews would change schools and start a new life. He would work a variety of jobs, including driving a cab and worked as a hospital porter, but at night he would stalk his victims at local bars. In 2016, in an effort to spare his life, Matthews would cut a deal with prosecutors, admitting to both murders and the 2005 attack. Matthews would receive 4 life sentences in prison without any chance of parole, and as recently as December of 2020, it would be revealed that Matthews was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like button and subscribe, and we'll see you again on Rock and Roll True Stories.